Dear caregiver.
Dear caregiver.
Dear caregiver.
Dear caregiver.
Caregiving to me means the ability to be there for someone when they need support, to be present and assist with their needs with love, with tenderness and mutual respect and dignity, often creating space when possible for self-determination and as much independent living as you can give.
Caregiving means to me the opportunity to live independently as a person with a disability. The disabled community relies on caregivers, personal care attendants, and people to be able to live on their own and to have the lives they truly want independently. Though I am not a caregiver, I have a great respect for caregivers and healthcare workers.
To me, caregiving becomes this language of acknowledging our interconnected humanity. It's a tangible act of telling another person that they matter and that we can see ourselves in them. I started a side project called Heart at Work, which is a platform for women of color to recenter their hearts in toxic workplaces through sharing resources and storytelling in a bi-monthly newsletter. For me, stories and conversations are central to care because it's a literal act of passing on wisdom, lessons learned, and knowledge, something that our hyper-competitive culture has taught us not to normalize. But I'm committed to creating spaces of care where witnessing our interconnected humanities can help women of color navigate spaces that weren't designed for us to thrive.
To be a caregiver means to be the nurturer of the world. It means to be selfless. I do consider myself to be somewhat of a caretaker or a caregiver, only because I am an aunt, I'm an older sister, a cat mom, I am a dog mom, I'm a plant mom, and all of those things are life forms, which means they all need to be taken care of in some way, shape, and or form.
So a caregiver for me is exactly what is found in the word, to give grace to others by being empathetic to the situations of those persons that you are trying to help and care about. Here with the nonprofit organization of Líderes Campesinas, we strive to make a more caring world by allowing our field worker communities to guide our efforts. They tell us what they need to adhere their human rights, and we hope to always have for them a caring space with resources and leadership positions for them to help and care for one another in a world where situations may be unjust.
To me, caregiving means giving one's attention, intention, and presence to another person or thing or to yourself. And I think that caregiving is something that we're all capable of doing, but it's been gendered and it's been undervalued, even though it's something that's so crucial to being functional and having a functional social system and ecosystem and community and society.
Especially now during the pandemic, we've come to see how much caregiving has also meant mutual aid support, providing food and groceries for those who need it, showing up and caring when what little safety net there was is gone. In my case, I'm a family caregiver for my dad who is living with dementia. Caregiving has meant being an advocate for him as we navigate the medical industry during COVID, from his sudden hospitalization to post-discharge. Caregiving is also about those who take care of the caregivers, like my wife who has held it down in our household while I was gone and kept our family needs in order so I didn't have to worry.
I care for myself. I don't have a caregiver. I'm the recipient of a heart and kidney transplant, and I need a lot of support, and I rely on my community for that support. Now, I'm a disability rights activist. I'm also the founder and director of a small education nonprofit called Project Ascend, and we provide college scholarships to youth with disabilities. Our organization assists with caregiving by giving people with disabilities equal access to education and the financial support to go back to school and to be able to live independent lives and work and use their education to enter the workforce and to further the cause of equal rights for people with disabilities.
This pandemic has intensely highlighted the challenges our caregivers face. How we care for our caregivers just isn't enough or even right. But I'm thoughtful of what will or won't change for our caregivers after this crisis is over. This will require huge shifts in not just our policies, but in our cultural conceptions of who is entitled to be cared for. Caregivers are not disposable. They're not robots, but they're often treated that way. As a biracial Filipino American, I'm also particularly interested in unpacking the exploitative systems of colonialism and US imperialism that, for lack of better words, forcibly siloed thousands of Filipinos into caregiving work, mostly along gendered lines. So while many of us are now just getting our COVID-19 vaccines, it's really important for me to highlight how Filipino caregivers have time and time again stood on the front lines of many US healthcare crises. And in this pandemic specifically, the demands on healthcare professionals and healthcare caregivers have disproportionately affected deaths in the Filipino American community.
Caregiving has been an essential position for Black women. There's been years and a constant history of women, Black women more specifically, having to take care of white people's babies. Not only that, but I think caregivers do lack respect as far as they're literally handling and taking care of someone's life, and yet, you know, they're not really seen as modern day superheroes like your everyday firefighter, police officer, or doctor. Yet they do just as much work as any of them, right?
Caregivers should continue their fight in standing up for what is right and aiding those communities in need that have been marginalized for decades. It is time to care for one another and show our stand in ending discrimination in any shape and form. Even when times feel rough, such as was the case with the COVID-19 pandemic, we should continue to care. We're at a time and place where technology exists, and we should do the best of our abilities to continue our caring efforts. Our communities still need caregivers. You can always begin with yourself, because if you are not well, how do you expect others to do well?
I work at Sakhi, which is a 32-year-old gender justice organization that supports survivors of violence from the South Asian diaspora. And we seek to honor the inherent and collective power of all survivors within our movement to end gender-based violence. So at Sakhi, I'm surrounded by caregivers, people who are advocates, who are counselors. It's just an entire team of people who are working to create a world that is equitable and inclusive. And I think that change starts with the individual in that sense, because we can't create equity and inclusivity without discussing what those things mean and who they affect and how they affect us and what the path to achieving them might look like.
I work for the National Domestic Workers Alliance. We're the nation's leading voice for dignity and fairness for domestic workers in the United States. And we're also part of the Care Can't Wait campaign, making sure that we invest in our nation's care economy with good union paying jobs for care workers and ensuring universal access to paid family leave, affordable and quality childcare and caregiving options for people with disabilities and aging adults. Women of color make up the majority of the working class, making labor a racial and gender justice issue. The only way to move our country forward is to make sure that care is at the center of equitable solutions.